Emily, thanks for joining us. I'm not going to ask the obvious question first. I'm going to save that till later. So the other obvious question is, how excited are you for the brand new Betfred Women's Super League season kicking off? Not for you this week, but for Leeds and York.
Yeah, really looking forward to it, actually. Really looking forward to us kicking off against York in 2 weeks' time. But obviously, as you say, really looking forward to seeing Leeds and York go head to head on Sunday. Should be really interesting to see. I know obviously they've got quite a few new recruits in Leeds, and York finished the season really well last year. So yeah, it'll be interesting, and looking forward to seeing them two teams come up against each other.
Long year last year with the World Cup. How are you feeling physically and mentally after that long year of rugby league?
I think I'm feeling really good now. After the World Cup, not so much. I needed a break after the World Cup. It was really intense, and I think with the delay as well, it was like 2 full-on years where we were just like building for the World Cup, and it's all we sort of thought about, all we sort of worked on, and it was so intense. And I really needed a break after that World Cup, so I just didn't even think about rugby after the 19th of November until about January, and then it took me probably a week, 2 weeks to actually get back into training. It was hard going back after a long break, but now, we've had a really good pre-season at Saints. Really enjoyed Matty Smith being coaching us and having some like new, fresh ideas. So yeah, pre-season's gone really well, and I'm feeling really good from it. So looking forward to starting in 2 weeks' time.
Can we expect to see a slightly different St Helens this year? Because you've lost some of your more experienced players, but you've drafted in some under-19s. Will that show on the field? I don't know, a bit more energy or youthfulness?
Well, yeah, I think it really will. It feels a lot different at Saints this year for me. I think we have lost some of our experience. We basically lost 7 sort of starting players in Amy gone to Leeds, Carrie and Beth retiring. Isabel and Alice, who were sort of like coming off the bench as starting props, they're both having a year out. And then Danny Bush who's on the wing, is busy with work. So that's like 7 key players we've lost and we've replaced with younger players. So obviously, the feel in Saints is a lot different, and it's pre-season has been probably really, really different in contrast to the last couple of years, because I felt like we have had a really experienced side. Everybody knows what they're doing, and it was a lot sort of, I don't know what the word is, just a bit more routine. Whereas this year, new coach, a lot of new players, and them coming to terms with how we play. It has been different, and I think it'll probably take us a couple of weeks to find our feet in the season, especially for some of them young girls who have not really experienced playing open age. They've only played in under 19s. This will be the first open age season. But it is really exciting because we had a pre-season friendly against Bradford on Sunday, and some of those girls really stood out and even surprised me after training with them for so long. I thought, wow, they've really stepped up in this game. So that is exciting, and I'm really looking forward to them sort of making a name for themselves, hopefully this year.
And the season finished on a disappointing note. Clearly, you won the Challenge Cup. That was a great afternoon, but that sort of mid-season, and it petered out towards the end. How much does that now weigh on you and act as motivation?
Yeah, definitely. We definitely don't want to go into this season thinking that we're not, gonna win something, because obviously 2 years ago we won. We felt like we did win everything, and then we went into the next season feeling like we was capable of doing that again, but it didn't materialize. So I think, yeah, that does give us a drive, especially for those older girls. I think for the younger girls, they weren't part of that last year, and their motivation is probably quite different. They just want to do well, make a bit of a name to themselves, represent the club really well. I think for us more experienced players, we definitely want to compete. We know how strong Leeds and York were last year, and probably even stronger this year. So we definitely want to go and compete against those teams. And I'm looking forward to the fact that the games will be a lot more competitive this year. 2 years ago, it was not easy, but we were comfortable. Whereas this year, I don't think we're going to have that same, feeling of being comfortable every game. And we are going to have to really play our best when we come up against these teams if we want to get the win.
Young players, new coach. We keep being told about male coaches. They have to acclimatized to the way that women, I don't know, act is probably the wrong word, but you're a different breed to men. How is Matty Smith getting on? I don't know the right phrase to you, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
How is Matty Smith getting on?
Yeah, I totally know what you mean. I think it is very different, and I think for him, he'll probably admit that himself, that only ever being around, men and male teams it is very different when you come into a women's team. And I think what's really good about Matty is he's got so much knowledge, so much experience, and he really does pass that on to us. But I think he's probably took him a few weeks learning how to deal with people in the team, and the difference that women bring. And I think also just the where the women's game's at, it's very different to the men's at the minute. And, I think he's probably seen that firsthand, that we do have to, fight for things at the club that we don't get given straight away. The men get given these things, and whatever it might be, supplements, extra kit, things like that. And they're not given to us like they are to the men. And Matty Smith's like, oh, you don't already, that's not already something that you have. And we're like, no, actually. So, he's sort of experienced that firsthand, that we're developing, and the women's game is getting so much better, and the support is everything is improving, but it's nowhere near, where the men are at. And I think that's been maybe a bit of an eye-opener for him as well.
The men have rebuilt many times over the last decade or so into this team which wins championship after championship after championship. I don't think that they've ever had to go through, as you say, having 7 players, first team players, all disappear at once. Obviously you had that good result against Bradford in the friendly. Do you feel the team's gelling ahead of the start of the season?
Yeah, I do think we're gelling. I think it'll take time. I don't think that we're at that stage where we probably started the season last year. Like you say, we've lost a lot of experience and new players in new positions, and you're having those like new connections. I'm used to playing with Amy in my centre, and now at England and at Saints, and now I've got a different centre, a different halfback. So yeah, it'll take time for us to kind of develop those bonds and as a team. And I don't expect to go out and blow teams away in the first couple of games of the season, but nobody wins the league or anything important at the start. So I think, we have got that time to build into the season, hopefully. And, I think that it'll be an interesting start for those young girls, because York is going to be one of the toughest teams we face, and to kick off the season with them, it should be a good marker for actually where we're at.
You mentioned your relationship with the club. Clearly, one of the big talking points going into this new season is that York, Leeds and Wigan are paying something towards expenses, even if it's incentive-based. Saints at the moment haven't said that they're going to do that. How's that gone down in the dressing room?
It's a tough one. It's a tough one for me, because I really think that we deserve to get paid. And other clubs are offering that. And I know that some of the girls could have had the opportunity to go and get paid elsewhere, but we decided to stick together as a squad. And it's tough because we get things in other ways at Saints. We're not going to get paid this season. We know that. We've had the discussion with Mike Rush. He's not going to pay us this season. It's another conversation for the start of next season. But they have stepped up this year, which I'm pleased about, because I had I wasn't happy at the start of the season when all that come out, because, you're seeing what other players are getting. You're thinking, well, we're doing exactly the same thing. And in some respects, the likes of me and Jodie and TJ and Shanette, we've been around a long time. And then there's other girls that, and no disrespect to them, they deserve it, but there's 16, 17, 18-year-olds who've been around a year who are now getting paid. And we're like, hang on a minute, that doesn't sound fair. So, we had a discussion with the club, told them how we felt about it, and the club come back and have done some good things this year. They're paying for every player to have a gym membership. They're paying for all our supplements. We've got really good other support in other ways, which we didn't have last year, medical support and nutritional support. So I think, it's better in the sense that last year we were paying out for those things. I was paying for my own gym membership. I was paying for my own supplements. So this year I'm not doing that. which, yes, it's not a payment to me directly, but it's definitely meaning that I'm not having to, put my hand in my own pocket to play for the club, which I don't think we should have to at this point. I think the game's got to a point now where, like you say, teams are getting paid, and I think that it's only going to get better, get more money, better sponsorship. So I think we're in this really tough position at the minute where it's like limbo. We're still working full time, but we want to get paid for the club, but we're not professional. So it is a difficult situation. The club have been good. I think, I always think all clubs can do more. I'm outspoken and always demanding more. Even when I get a bit back, I'm like, yeah, but what about this? What about that? So, I mean, I'm probably harsh on the club, really. But yeah, we'll see what happens next year. It should be interesting because I think the league is going to set out new standards, and hopefully, it'll be more of a requirement rather than an optional, which it sort of is at the minute. So yeah, we'll see. It should be interesting.
So perfect captain material, and I'm sure we'll come on to that subject in a little while. But
Yeah.
I just wanted to talk about the Challenge Cup, because obviously you're the holders of it, you'll want to retain it. But this year you get the opportunity to do that at Wembley. Now, again, there might not be a cash incentive attached to that, but what an opportunity to play in the National Stadium. That must really fire you up.
Yeah, I think for me that's the big goal for this year. I think, if we don't win anything else, I definitely want to get to Wembley. What an opportunity that is. How exciting. I've been going to Wembley since a young kid. Me and Jodie played for school in the national championships, in the school championships, and we went and walked around Wembley about 4 times, and loved it, just soaking in that atmosphere from such a young age. I've just got a real sort of like love for Wembley and for the Challenge Cup. So to actually play our final there would be unbelievable. So yeah, I think that's a big goal. And I think if we do make it to that semi-final, I think that'll be the biggest game of the year for us, really, because that is actually you're going to get to Wembley or not. And I think, obviously then in that final, that's a different ball game altogether. But just to get there and be the, one of the women's teams who get to first experience that, I think that's really special. So hopefully, Saints can do the job and get there this year.
Just feel a bit like 1895 all over again, but instead of the men trying to get money, it's the women now. It's taken a long time for equality, and isn't even there yet. The captaincy, then let's talk about this. We'll talk about the World Cup first, because, as you say, it was a long build-up. You mentioned, feeling drained after it. I mean, I certainly didn't want to talk about rugby league, and I was just talking about it, let alone running around on the field.
Yeah.
How would you sum up England's campaign on the field at the World Cup?
I think the whole experience was incredible. I think it was, amazing to see that first game, that many young girls and boys and schools there, and the atmosphere. It was just such a buzz. I absolutely loved the World Cup. I really, really enjoyed being part of it. Such a proud moment, and obviously to lead the team out as well. That's just such a career high for me. It doesn't get much better, I don't think, than a home World Cup. Obviously disappointing with how it ended. I really, really felt that we had the potential and the capabilities to get to the final and to beat New Zealand. And I think we did well in that first half, and then things just, didn't materialize the way we probably wanted, and we didn't probably play how we should have done in that game in the second half. So, it was really disappointing, because I went into that game full of confidence, and I think a lot of the girls did as well, really thinking that. I'd basically spent 2 years dreaming about getting to a World Cup final, and all that build up. And I told, how many times I thought about being in that World Cup final. I can't even tell you. So when it doesn't happen, that's like such a downer. I can't even describe those feelings. It's just like, that's it. And it took a little bit of time to actually get over that. That was it then. We weren't having any more games. And it was like, we went back into camp that night, and then that morning straight after, we all went home. And it was just like no real debrief, no real like, that's it, that's the end. And then you didn't really speak to any of the team again. And it was like, what? And it took a long time to like actually get over that. And obviously I'm really close to Jodie and the girls at Saints. So I have that close network there. But it's hard to describe that feeling of building up for something and then it not getting there and then that just being it and then not really being spoken about again so much. You know, people I think feel awkward about asking you about it. So it's just sort of kept quiet. So I definitely needed space. I definitely needed time, and I got that. And I think now I've had that. Looking back, I'm so grateful for those opportunities, and I do look back at it as such a positive thing rather than that disappointment of the semi-final. Sorry. So yeah, it's unbelievable experience.
We spoke after the draw was made, and the first question I think I asked was about Brazil, because obviously that was the bizarre thing which I don't think anyone expected. Well, didn't think rugby league was played in Brazil, let alone a women's team. From that long journey into the World Cup, you play Brazil at Headingley, big crowd, full of kids, as you mentioned. You meet royalty at the second game. What's going to stick with you as positive memories from that World Cup?
Yeah, I think, like you say, that hopefully the legacy that we've left afterwards. And I think a lot of young girls who eventually play Super League in the next couple of years will hopefully have those memories to look back on of that World Cup, and people and look at the players like Amy, like Leah scoring so many tries, people having great performances. Hopefully those will inspire the next generation, and hopefully we'll hear about it for future years, girls talking about that, because there was such a buzz in the crowd. And even after the games, I love the fact that so many people come down to around the field and wanted things signed, wanting photographs, just wanted to speak to you. And really, we'd never experienced that before. I'd played a home World Cup in 2013, and there was nothing like that. No, I don't think I got asked for one autograph, one picture the whole time that World Cup went on. So the fact that you've got that after every single game, and even when you're out and about as well, that's just so lovely. And I think the repercussions of that I'm still feeling that, and all the girls are the same. It's now whenever I go places and I meet new people know that you play rugby, and they've just heard that you play or seen you, on social media or on whatever. And there's that sort of people know about it. Whereas the last couple of years, it's been very like only people within rugby league have known about it. Whereas I think the stage with the games being on the BBC, and the big coverage around it, a lot of other people who are not rugby league fans knew about it and interested in it. So I think that's really great for the game, and hopefully that will continue in the next couple of years.
See, this is a strange thing, and it's no disrespect to anyone who had the role before you, but you're probably the first England women, Great Britain women's captain who people will have heard of just because of the nature of the coverage these days. So how hard was it to give up that role?
Well, it's difficult, because I know it says that basically Stu had come in as a new coach, and before Stu had even come in, Craig had the conversation with me before the World Cup, saying that when a new coach takes over, it's likely that they'll want to pick a new captain. They'll pick other new staff and have a new captain as a fresh sort of start, and that's really what's happened. It's not so much I've decided. It's been a decision that Stu's made, which I completely respect. And he's just come in and said, fresh start, fresh look on the team, different person to lead the squad. And I think that, the person he's chosen, I know obviously it's not been announced yet, is going to be an incredible captain. So that's really exciting for the England team going forward. Obviously a different role for myself, but something that I am actually looking forward to. I've loved being captain. I've loved being in that role. But it was a lot of pressure, and it was a lot of weight on your shoulders. I probably didn't realize it at the time, but now that it's been taken from me, I have felt like a bit of a weight lifted, and I'm like, right, okay, now I can just actually focus on myself, focus on my game, my performance, because I want to make the next World Cup, hopefully, but the competition for places in that team is becoming so much more difficult, even for the more experienced players like myself. So I know that if I want to make it to that next World Cup in a couple of years, I'm going to have to work incredibly hard. And I think now I've got sort of the space to focus on doing that, and hopefully get to that point where I can finish my career with 5 World Cups, hopefully.
I mean, you mentioned that the next one is only 3 years away, and it's in the Northern Hemisphere as well. In fact, it's now 2 years away because we're in 2023. Yeah. But how much of an incentive was that for you to stay on as an England player, rather than just like probably us mere mortals would have done? He said, if you don't want me as captain, then I'll just walk away from it.
Yeah, I think I've always had in the back of my mind that I want to try and get 5 World Cups. I think I was really fortunate to get that first World Cup when I was 16. And I knew that I'd be turning sort of like 33, 34 in the 5th World Cup. And I've sort of always set that as a goal for myself to try and get there. And I know it's going to be tough. I really do feel the competition. The likes of like Holly Dodd, who had an incredible World Cup, Vicky Molyneux, incredible World Cup, and then even people like Paige and other people coming through at second row. It's going to be tough. There's so much competition, and I really do want to represent England in the next future games. So yeah, I think I knew after that World Cup I wasn't really ready to finish. I knew I have more to give, and I've got a couple more years left playing. I know that after that, if I do get there, after that I'll be done. I'm definitely retiring after that next World Cup if I make it. I've had an incredible career, and I know there's really exciting things still to come with Women's Rugby League, and I'm not ready to give that up yet. I'm not ready to like walk away when I know there's really exciting opportunities, the likes of Wembley, the likes of maybe getting paid next year and whatever else the RFL have got in store. I do want to be part of that while I still can. So I'm going to make the most of the next couple of years and hopefully finish on a high.
You mentioned that Stuart Barrow wants to put his stamp on the team. If there was a criticism about the previous regime, it was maybe that Craig was too St Helens centric. Now, obviously, you're in the midst of that. Other people are only looking at it from the outside and making that judgment. Yeah. Would that be a fair criticism, would you say?
No, but I'm biased, and I was Craig and me have got a really good relationship, and I'm a St Helens player myself. I think that when so many St Helens players got brought in, I think Saints were out and out the best team, and you couldn't look away from that obviously the majority of players in the England squad are going to be from that treble winning team. Obviously things then the next year, the World Cup that got delayed, but the majority of the team is always going to be made up from Leeds, York and Saints. There's odd other players in and I know there's a lot more players going to be coming through this year, but I think the majority of the team is going to be coming from those top clubs. So yeah, I think it did change towards the end, and I think actually in the World Cup, if you look at how many Saints players got played, it probably was equivalent to Leeds and York. I know a lot of the girls like Carrie and Beth, who else am I missing? There's quite a few Saints girls who only played one game in that World Cup and didn't actually make the bench for any other games. So yeah, I think I would probably say that is an unfair call, really. It's easy to call Craig out and say, oh, you're Saints bias, isn't it? Because he's at the club. But I think he actually just picked the players that were performing the best at the time. And I think he did that throughout each game in the World Cup and picked those players who we thought he had the best chance with, no matter what club they were coming from, in the who they play for on a weekly basis. So
how do we short of making you play for another team, how do we equalise things more in Women's Super League? Because as you say, there's York and there's Leeds and there's Saints, and then there's a slight drop off to the rest of the sites. Is that a possible thing to do? Organic, or do we have to wait organically for players to come through? I know Wigan talking about lots of young players coming through. Obviously, the same for you at Saints as well now.
It's hard. I think it naturally will happen in the next couple of years. I don't know whether we need to force it. I think, like you say, if you did make it you spread out some of the players, and some of the Saint girls went to maybe, you know, Warrington or Wigan or whatever, and evened it out a little bit, then yeah, it probably would be competitive. But then arguably, would the standard be as good for us who were playing? Like, I think if I went down, and not down, but, you know, to a different team who maybe didn't have any other England players, and I was the only England player in that squad, I would feel probably that the standard wasn't the same as what I'm playing at now on a weekly basis and who I'm training with. So I think it's difficult, and you could probably argue for both, but I do think it will naturally occur in the next couple of years. Like you say, there's a lot of strong young talent coming through, and there's a lot of players who are at the top who will retire in the next couple of years. So I think it will even out, and we'll see a big shift probably before the next World Cup, and definitely around that time. I don't envision the England team being sort of anywhere similar to what it was for the last World Cup. You know, each cycle that I've been through, there's probably been about 4 or 5 players that have stuck around in that England squad, and everybody else is new. So I expect that'll probably be a similar thing that happens in a couple of years. Obviously, it's slightly different with it being closer, but you know, there's loads of young talent, and that young talent will make it into the England squad. We will have younger players who are 20, 21, like we did in this World Cup, who come through and play in an England shirt. So, you know, what clubs they represent, I don't know, but I do think there will be some that come from the likes of like Warrington and maybe those teams that people underestimate at the minute. I think that you'll see a lot of young talent coming through in those clubs.
When we talk about men going to play in the NRL, there's different questions to ask, because you have lives in the Women's Super League. You have lives outside rugby league. You're not, as we know, you're not professional players. It's not your job to go and play for West Tigers or whatever. If you were given the opportunity, would you fancy a crack at the NRLW? Obviously, there's a bit of a financial incentive there, but obviously you've got to trade off of you've got to make sacrifices in your real life as well.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard for me because obviously I'm 31 now, and I think if it was one of these players who was like, you know, 23, 24, 25, I would absolutely definitely take that opportunity. I think what an exciting thing to do with your career, and you know, go out there. I would love to do it because I'd love to see how I got on in that competition. I'd love to compete at the top level. You know, we didn't even get to play Australia in the last World Cup. And last time I got to play them was, 2017? And then it won't be for another 2 years again, probably, when we get the opportunity. And I want to play against Australia. You know, I want to, these players who we say are the best players in the world, I want to see how I can match up against them. I'd love to compete on a weekly basis with them. But obviously, that's difficult unless, like you say, you go and sign for him. So yeah, I think if I was younger, 100%. If I got the opportunity now, I don't know, it'd be hard. Like you say, it's a big life change when you've got like a house and a dog and all the rest of it. Then you just move over there. It's like, well, actually, hang on a minute, I've got a load of responsibility here. So it'd be a tough decision, but yeah, I would love to see how I could get on in that competition.
I mean, clearly we want the elite players to stay here because we want to grow the competition. You've already said that you think that talent will be coming up from the bottom. But in terms of England, would it help our chances to narrow the gap with Australia and New Zealand if some of our younger top players did go out and play in the NRLW?
Yeah, I think it's hard because if you lose them all, then probably the standard then goes a backward step in the league here. So I think it's hard, isn't it? They probably would raise their game out there, and it definitely benefit them individually. But would it benefit the league overall? Probably not. I think it would have an advantage for the England team, but I think we probably need to just raise the standard of Women's Super League here. It will be really interesting when somebody does eventually sign, and I think, you know, that could potentially happen this year, if not next year. But it's going to happen, isn't it? You know, somebody from England is going to make a big signing over there in Australia, and that's going to be incredibly exciting for that individual and for English rugby league, women's rugby league, to see how that person gets on. You know, whoever it is, I will 100% be backing them and want them to be really successful out there, because I always want us to be able to compete with the Aussies and the Kiwis, and you know, think that they actually are. I think sometimes people think, oh, they're superhuman, but you know, yes, they've got advantages that they're getting paid, but at the end of the day, they're still women, same age, same size, same weight. I mean, you know, it'd be really interesting to match up against them. So I'm excited for somebody to sign, whoever that will be, and I think it's something that happens in the near future.
Clearly, you're a passionate and incredibly eloquent advocate for women's rugby league. You've done a bit of media work in and around the sport, and there are more opportunities now than probably there ever have been for women to not even just cover the women's game, but commentate on the men's as well. Is that a route that you might look to go down as your career starts to? I don't want to prematurely write you off, but come to an end.
No, yeah, definitely, I agree with you. Yeah, you know, I would love to have some of those opportunities. It's difficult because at the minute, people do often say to me, "Oh, like, why don't you commentate on Sky, or you know, go and, you know, like Jodie Diaz and obviously Danica with the men." But honestly, I would struggle at the minute because you're so busy with everything you've got to do, and I very rarely get time to sit down and watch TV, and when I do, I probably want to do something other than rugby. So following the men's game for me is quite hard at the minute. You know, I rarely catch many games, so to commentate on it at this moment in time would be difficult. I would be happy, I'd happily comment on the women's game. Obviously, I'm obviously invested in what goes on in the women's game, and I know a lot what happens, so that'd be a lot easier. The men's, I would struggle at the minute. It might be different when I retire and I've got a lot more time, but yeah, I think going forward it'd be great to see more women in media, more women talking about rugby league, and yeah, I'd love that opportunity. I do like doing things like this and speaking about the game, because like you say, I'm so passionate about it. So any sort of promotion that you can give the game, I think is always going to be positive. So yeah, I'd love to see more women involved in that area of the game.
It was funny at the launch last week, because I think it's the Women's Super League launch, and men outnumbered the women by probably about 2-1. Not just on the media side, but everyone there in the room. I was going to ask a question of Jodie Cunningham last week, but she was too busy, which was good because now we've got you instead. Okay. But you know her better than anyone, having played with her for forever. Yeah. What's her best position on the field? Because no one seems to know. Do you know what it is?
Well, she's one of these players. She started her career, Jodie, and she was just like utility player for any position. So everybody always had her in the squad because she could cover any position. And I think that has been such a strength of hers. She hated it at the start because she wanted to be the best at one position, and she used to get so frustrated that she wasn't getting picked, and she'd be put on the bench for England games, really. And she wanted that one position. She wanted to nail down a position. And now I think she's realised that actually that's such a strength of hers, that she can play in a position. I think for me, I love her at fullback. I loved her at fullback. I thought she was incredible fullback. But actually, I think 13, she's played really well there as well. So probably either of those positions. I think if you ask Jodie, I think she'd probably say she really loves playing 13. She does like being in the forwards. She always says that, you know, she thinks she could play second row. She could even play prop and maybe finish a career there. So I think she loves training with the forwards. And I think she would probably say that playing 13 loose forward is her favourite position.
What would be the summation of where Saints will be this year? Obviously, say a changing squad, change of coach. What are your expectations? What are your hopes for 2023?
My hopes, like I say, are that we get to Wembley. I think that's the big goal. But I also hope that we find our feet as a squad, and these younger players who, you know, are going to be experiencing the first year in Women's Super League, I hope that they really thrive off that experience and that opportunity. And I hope that we really see some incredible new faces that you've never heard of before, you've never seen play before, and people start talking about these young girls and saying, you know, have you seen that kid at Saints, that kid at York, Leeds, wherever it is. And, you know, we start to hear about more women and more girls in the game. Because I think, you know, you often talk about the same sort of players who've been around a while. It'd be nice to start to see some of these younger girls really make a stamp on the game. And I think for Saints, we've got a lot of girls who can potentially do that. I'm looking forward to starting the season because I'm looking forward to seeing how we get on as a squad. It's very different this year for us, but I know we've still got that strength in the experienced players, and hopefully we can help those younger girls to get up to that same standard, and we'll really compete this year. You know, I hope that we do. We do win some trophies and we make it to Wembley and we have a really, really good season. So yeah, we'll see what happens in this first game in 2 weeks' time.
The France game comes up very shortly after that. It's very early in the season to have an international. If you were Stuart Barrow, would you be saying, I need to give some of these young kids that you're talking about a run out, or would you stick with the core of the team that played in the World Cup and is going to be there for the World Cup?
To be honest, I think you probably will need to stick with a lot of the players who were in the World Cup. Obviously, there'll be some there was some new faces brought into the England squad anyway, like the likes of like Sinead and a couple of other players. But yeah, I think that the basis has got to be around that World Cup squad, because I know that France are going to be tough. You know, I've heard that they've recruited really well, and with the World Cup being in France, I think they've got a lot of rugby union players who are interested in playing league. So you know, I think they've got some good players coming in who we've maybe not seen play for France before, which I think will strengthen that squad. So it's difficult. I think you will like to give some of the younger girls a run out, definitely, because you do want to see them in an international game and in an England shirt and how they cope with that, the new pressures of that. But I think you'll probably need to keep some of that experience to make sure you secure the win. So it'll probably be a mixture of the two. But I'm hoping France have, you know, strengthened their side and it's a more competitive game. You know, we need that as an England squad. We don't get the joys of playing Australia and New Zealand on a regular basis, but we can play France on a regular basis, you know, each year, multiple times. So I hope they do strengthen, and I hope it's a real competitive game for us as an England squad, and I think that'll put us in good stead going into the next World Cup.
I think we have found the equality point for men and some women's rugby league in England. Neither play Australia or New Zealand too often. Emily, thank you very much for your time. Congratulations on your career so far as England captain and now going on into the future. And the best of luck with St Helens. And yeah, thanks for your time and best of luck for the season.
Thanks very much, guys. Thanks for having me on.